So when you talk about building muscles, are we talking about focusing on hypertrophy or like focusing on just like overall strength than the muscle growth from that?
Yeah, I would say more or less starting with hypertrophy because you want to build as much muscle mass as possible around the core. And it can go into more specifics depending on what you're trying to do or what the goal is. But ideally, like on a general adaptation phase or focus standpoint, you want to build some hypertrophy there just because you want to have some muscle. And the more muscle you have, the more strength you can kind of create after that.
Yeah, one of the people I follow, Dr. Mike Israetel, right from RP Strength. He's phenomenal. If you guys don't know who he is, he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, RP Strength and Conditioning. And one thing that he talks about a lot is not loading super heavy when you're building for hypertrophy, right? Just quick eccentrics or quick concentric, long controlled eccentrics. Is that something that people should be focusing on as well for Jiu Jitsu?
Oh,
Time
yeah,
under
for sure.
tension.
100%. And that depends on like what phase you're in. But I think that like from a hypertrophy standpoint, I think that is the money there. And let's say, for instance, I kind of go back to what you were saying earlier about like an injury standpoint. It's ideal to go slow on both the concentric side and the eccentric side. Like you really don't want to just start poking through and starting to do sharp movements there. It's ideal to go with a slow tempo on both ends. So from a hypertrophy standpoint, when you're trying to grow muscle, exactly what you said. Go like sharp or like a 1 second on the concentric on the squeeze and on the eccentric on the release. You want to kind of create like a 4 second negative there.
Yeah, one thing that we hear a lot about in jiu-jitsu is having big muscles, isn't super great because of mobility issues, right? People get more tired because they're carrying more muscle. How do you see these things when you look at someone like, a Gordon Ryan who's huge, or all these other jiu-jitsu athletes that pretty much look like they're ready to step on stage in like 2 or 3 weeks, right? And then you hear these common people just saying like, "Oh, well, you don't want to build too much muscle because of X, Y, and Z," or you don't want your legs to be too strong because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever. How do you look at those kind of like comments?
Yeah, I think that Gordon Ryan's a specific one because in all capacities of athletic testing, he'd probably fail a lot of them, quite honestly. If you put him against like vertical jump or anything of the like any athletic test you put him on, Gordon Ryan would probably fail. I think where Gordon Ryan really shows itself is obviously purely he's the best. He's got incredible technique, but he also knows how to squeeze or create isometric strength in the right places at the right time. So for him, like building that isometric strength has been a big factor of how his game's progressed over the time as he's grown muscle. And quite simply, like he avoids much more injury just because he has a lot more muscle on him. But I think there's a ceiling there to how much muscle you
Mhm.
need compared to performance as well. And to your point, even with like Mike Israetel, uh, and he would probably agree with this, is that the more you do certain exercises, like say like a squat or deadlift or like loading weight, especially on the eccentric, you're actually not only building muscle, but you're actually building more range of motion as well. So you're actually creating more flexibility in that range. If you do a full range of motion rep, not one of those partial reps when you're kind of just trying to ego lift or whatnot, but going through full range of motion and not trying to lift as hard as you need to.
Yeah, I saw a recent guy talk about a study where it showed partial lifts, but in the bottom half of the partial being really good for mobility and strength and conditioning. Is that what you're that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about like the top half of a lift. So you only go halfway down with the bicep curl and then
Yeah,
instead of the full range of motion, right?
yeah. Like I would say definitely like that. Like I would even as well if you wanted to even go even deeper, you can do like a full set of say full range of motion squats, for instance, with no partials, nothing, and then directly after, kind of doing like an isometric hold, like loaded stretch at the bottom range. So that way you actually not only load the weight on the end range of the exercise, but you're also stretching as well.